Last fall, I drove up to the South Kaibab Trailhead at the Grand Canyon around 7 in the morning. Figured I'd knock out a solo hike before the heat got bad. But the second I signed the trail register, everything went wrong. The time on my phone froze at 7:09. The canyon felt like it was breathing. And when I opened the book again, I saw my own name already written 3 different times in someone else's handwriting. And that was only the start of the loop that hasn't ended yet. You're listening to ASMR 404 Found. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. So this happened last fall when I drove up to the South Kaibab Trailhead in Grand Canyon National Park, Arizona. It was still dark when I parked, and the air had that sharp desert chill that gets into your lungs and makes every breath feel cleaner than anything you ever breathed in a city. I remember looking east and seeing the first orange smear of dawn starting to push the horizon, and the sky still filled with stars that looked almost fake, like someone had turned the brightness up too far on a screen. And it was so quiet that even the sound of my boots on the gravel lot felt way too loud, like I was intruding on something ancient that didn't want me there. I'd been planning this hike for months, and I wanted to do it solo because that was the way I cleared my head. Long miles with nobody around. No conversation to distract me. Just the crunch of dirt under my feet and the rhythm of my breathing. The South Kaibab is one of those trails that drops fast and deep into the canyon. No water, no shade, just this relentless path that pulls you down into the earth. And I figured if I started before sunrise, I'd beat the crowds and get to Skeleton Point before the heat set in. I signed the trail register by the kiosk with that flickering light above it, and the pen was almost out of ink. So the letters of my name were faint, like a ghost scribbled them. Then I shouldered my pack and headed down the trail, and the first switchbacks felt strange in the dark, because the canyon just drops off into black nothing, and the only thing keeping you company is the sound of wind rushing up from below, carrying the dry mineral smell of stone and dust. As the sky brightened, I started to notice little details that put me on edge even, though I tried to shake it off at first, like how the trail seemed narrower than I remembered from pictures online, like the stone retaining walls were leaning just slightly inward, as if the canyon was closing in. Or how when I passed the first mule staging area, there were hoof prints leading down, but none coming back up, even though I hadn't seen or heard any groups starting this early. About a mile in, I stopped to sip water and take in the view. And that's when I realized something that made my stomach knot up. The silence wasn't just deep, it was absolute. No bird calls, no insects, no distant scurry of small animals. Nothing at all. Just my own heart beating and the rasp of my breath. It was like stepping into a vacuum, and it made my skin crawl because I grew up hiking. And there's always some kind of background noise, even in desert country, always some kind of life moving around. But here, it felt like everything had fled or gone into hiding. I told myself I was being dramatic and pushed on, winding down toward Point, the place where most hikers stop for their first big view. The sun was just cresting the horizon now, lighting up the canyon walls in these insane layers of red and gold and purple, and I tried to let that beauty wash the unease out of me. But when I reached Point, the stone ledge was empty. No other hikers, no mule groups, not even footprints fresh enough to look recent. And yet, there was a dampness on the rock, like something had been sitting there in the dark, soaking moisture from the air or from itself. And when I put my hand on the stone, it was warm. Not sun warm, but body warm, like pressing your palm against someone's skin. That was when I first got the sense that I wasn't really alone, and it wasn't the kind of feeling you get when you know another hiker is somewhere up ahead. It was sharper and heavier. It felt like standing in a locked room while someone hides in the corner watching you breathe. I didn't linger at Point. I just kept moving down the switchbacks, and as the sun came up, the shadows of the rock formations started stretching across the trail, and I kept catching them out of the corner of my eye in shapes that didn't match the stone that cast them, shapes too tall, too narrow, sometimes moving just slightly against the angle of the sun. And every time I turned to look, the shadows were normal again. Just rock and brush, nothing else. By the time I reached Cedar Ridge, I was sweating, even though the air was still cool, and my pulse felt too fast, like I'd been running, even though I'd kept a steady pace. And that was when I heard the first sound that didn't belong. It was a voice low and stretched thin, carried on the wind. It didn't sound like English, or at least not in words I could recognize. It was more like someone trying to talk while breathing through water. A slow, bubbling chant that drifted up from below the ridge. I froze and listened hard, and for a moment I swore I heard my own name, tangled in that sound. Then it faded like it had been pulled straight down into the canyon. I thought maybe I was dehydrated or hearing wind through the rocks. But when I looked down at the trail ahead, the dust was disturbed. Not just footprints, but drag marks. Like something heavy had been pulled down the switchbacks, and the tracks were fresh edges, sharp, not softened by time or wind. I don't know what possessed me to keep following instead of turning back. Maybe stubbornness, maybe some stupid need to prove that I wasn't just freaking myself out. But I pressed on, and with every step, the canyon felt less like open space and more like a throat swallowing me down the walls, pressing higher, the trail dropping deeper. And that chanting sound came back in fragments, never long enough to catch fully always. On the edge of hearing, but always with that same twisted impression that my name was woven into it. When I reached the skeleton point, I stopped, dead. The place was empty. The view stretched out forever, but the trail itself was wrong. There were piles of stones stacked in little towers along the edges of the path, dozens of them balanced with impossible precision. Some only 3 rocks high, others taller than my chest, each one tilted slightly inward as if leaning toward me, and I swear they hadn't been there when I researched the hike. Nobody mentioned cairns like this on the South Kaibab. They looked less like trail markers and more like gravestones. That's when the wind hit me hard from below, carrying a stench that didn't belong in open desert air. It was sweet and rotten at the same time, the smell of meat left too long in the sun, and with it came the sound of rocks shifting as if those towers were settling. But when I looked, none of them had moved. Still, they felt closer, like the space between them and me had tightened without me stepping forward. I was about to turn back when I noticed something carved into the dirt in the center of the trail, a circle pressed deep into the ground, with lines radiating out like a sunburst. Only the lines were crooked, twisting at angles that made my eyes ache to follow. And at the center of that circle was a single footprint, barefoot, human-sized, but pressed so deep into the packed earth that it looked burned in instead of stepped. My throat went dry and I realized I hadn't heard the chant for a few minutes, but that silence didn't feel like safety. It felt like waiting, like something holding its breath. That was the moment I knew I should have turned back, but I didn't, and I've been regretting that choice ever since. So I stood there at skeleton point, staring at that burned-in footprint at the center of the circle carved into the trail. And I kept telling myself it had to be some prank, some hiker with too much time on their hands, trying to mess with people. But the longer I looked, the less that explanation made sense. The lines were too clean, too deep, too deliberate, and the footprint wasn't just pressed down. It had left the edges of the dirt singed like it had been heated from inside the earth itself. And I didn't smell smoke, and I didn't see any ash. But my eyes watered when I leaned closer, like standing near an invisible campfire. The wind kept pushing up from the depths of the canyon, carrying that sour, sweet rot smell. And every time it gusted, the stone cairns around me rattled just slightly, tiny trickles of dust sliding down their sides like they were breathing along with me. And I couldn't shake the idea that if I turned my back on them for too long, they'd shift or topple or worse, arrange themselves into something else. I crouched and ran my fingers across the lines in the dirt, expecting them to crumble under my touch. But the grooves were solid, like carved into rock instead of soil, and the ground felt colder than the air around it, biting cold in sharp contrast to the warmth I'd felt back at Ooh-Ah Point. And when I looked at my fingertips, they weren't dirty. They were wet, slick with something clear that smelled faintly metallic. I wiped my hand fast on my pants and stood up, my pulse hammering in my neck. And I told myself again that it was just minerals in the soil, or condensation, or some weird trick of the desert. But my gut wasn't buying it, and my gut has gotten me out of worse situations before. So I slung my pack higher on my shoulders and told myself I was done. I was turning back right then, before anything got stranger. Except when I turned, the trail behind me didn't look the same. The switchbacks that should have been rising up the canyon wall were there, but they felt stretched longer, steeper. The walls around them higher and narrower, like the canyon had shifted shape while I wasn't watching, and the sunlight didn't reach as far as it should have. Shadows pooling in the cracks like ink spreading across paper. I started climbing anyway, fast, determined to shake the nerves out of my body. But the air felt heavier every step I took, as if something was pressing down from above. And by the time I'd gone, maybe a quarter mile, I realized I couldn't hear my own footfalls anymore. The crunch of gravel was gone, replaced by this faint scraping sound that didn't line up with my steps, like something else was walking just a half beat behind me, dragging across the rock. I spun around, quick, expecting to see another hiker, or maybe an animal. But the trail was empty. Nothing there, just those same shadows bending in ways I didn't like. And the silence after my turn was worse than the sound had been, because it made me feel like whatever had been trailing me was smart enough to stop when I stopped. I kept climbing faster now, almost jogging, and the higher I went, the more wrong. Everything felt the air thinning, not like normal elevation loss, but like the canyon itself was sucking breath out of my lungs. My head buzzing with that strange whispering chant that had drifted up earlier now, threading faintly into my ears, like it was inside my skull, rather than coming from anywhere external. And every now and then, it would twist itself into something that sounded exactly like my name, drawn out long and wet, like it had been chewed before spoken. By the time I reached Cedar Ridge again, the sky overhead had turned this hazy white knot, the bright desert blue I had seen earlier. It was almost like clouds had rolled in, but I couldn't see any shapes up there. Just this blank sheet that swallowed the light, making the rocks duller and darker. And that was when I noticed the drag. Marks in the dirt were back, only now they weren't heading down. They were heading up in the exact direction I'd come from, and they were deeper, wider, like whatever made them was getting larger or heavier. I froze, staring at those gouges in the trail, and that was when the smell hit me stronger than before. Not faint on the wind, but thick in my nose, like something had been dumped out right beside me. Meat and copper and bile all blended together, and I gagged behind my bandana. But when I looked around, there was nothing. No carcass, no trash, no sign of decay. Just that stench coating the back of my throat. The cairns that had ringed Skeleton Point were gone now too. I didn't see when they disappeared, I didn't hear them fall. They were simply absent, like they'd never been there, except for a few scattered stones lying on the trail like breadcrumbs. That was the first time real fear cut through me, raw and sharp, not just unease but full-body terror. And I'll admit it, I broke into a run, my boots pounding the trail as fast as I could manage. The canyon walls whipping past me in red blurs, my breath ragged and hot, my eyes watering from that stink and that whisper in my ears, growing louder, louder until it was almost drowning out, the blood roaring in my head. I don't know how long I ran before I saw the wooden sign marking ooh, point again, and I nearly cried with relief. But the relief didn't last, because the overlook didn't look the same as before. The stone ledge was darker, like it had been scorched, and the warm patch I'd touched earlier had spread now. The entire flat surface radiated heat waves, rising visible in the air, like asphalt in July, and etched across the rock were dozens more footprints, burned in, overlapping each other in all directions. Some small like children's, some massive with toes, longer than my fingers, all pressed deep, as if whatever made them had been impossibly heavy. The chanting surged in my skull, then clear for the first time, and though I couldn't understand the words, the rhythm was unmistakable. It was a call and response, and the response was me, my own voice rising unbidden from my throat, without my consent, my lips moving to shape sounds I didn't know, my chest heaving with syllables that tasted like metal and smoke and rot, and I staggered back, choking on it, slamming my hand over my mouth to cut it off. But the echo of my voice carried anyway, bouncing from wall to wall, like the canyon itself was mocking me. I turned and ran again. No hesitation, no pause this time, aiming straight up toward the trailhead. But the switchbacks blurred together every turn, looking the same rocks, the same drop-offs, the same leaning walls, until I wasn't sure if I was actually making progress, or trapped in some loop designed to grind me down. At one point, I stumbled and fell hard on my knees, the skin tearing against gravel, and when I looked down, expecting to see blood, it wasn't blood at all. It was the same clear, metallic-smelling fluid that had slicked my fingertips at skeleton point, leaking thick from my torn skin and sizzling when it hit the ground, like acid on stone. I screamed, then raw animal panic ripping through me, and I forced myself up, ignoring the pain, ignoring the fluid dripping from me. And I kept running because if I stopped, I knew whatever had been following, whatever had been chanting, whatever had left those footprints would finally catch up, and I wasn't ready to know what that meant. When the trailhead kiosk finally came into view, it didn't look real at first. It looked like a mirage wavering at the top of a rise, the flickering light still buzzing faint against the pale sky, and I nearly collapsed when I reached it, my body shaking from exertion and terror. But the relief again didn't last, because the trail register, the one I had signed just 2 hours earlier, wasn't the same. My name was still there, faint in the pen's dying ink, but beneath it in darker, thicker strokes was my name again, written perfectly, but in handwriting that wasn't mine. So I just stood there staring at that register, my chest heaving, my knees shaking, and I kept reading my name over and over once in my faint half-dried ink, and once again right beneath it, darker and fresher, and not written by me, the letters sharpie like cuts in paper, the lines pressed deeper than a pen should go, as if whoever signed it carved straight into the paper with something sharper than metal. I remember running my finger over the second version of my name and feeling the grooves like scars on the page, and the air around the kiosk felt wrong, thicker than it should be, like humidity before a storm, except the sky overhead was still that strange blank white. No clouds, no blue, no sun. Just this washed out nothing that seemed to swallow my focus every time I glanced up. The flickering light buzzed and popped above me, and for a second I swore it dimmed. Not like a bulb failing, but like something had passed between me and it, something tall enough to block it entirely, then let it breathe back to life. I wanted nothing more than to get into my car and drive away. But when I turned toward the parking lot, I froze again, because the rows of vehicles weren't the same as when I'd arrived. My old SUV was there, exactly where I'd left it, but all the other cars looked older. Faded paint, cracked windshields, license plates rusted over, like they'd been sitting here, abandoned for decades. And the air was full of that heavy meat, rot stink again, stronger than ever clinging to the insides of my nose. I hurried toward my SUV, fumbling my keys out, my hands still slick with that clear metallic fluid leaking from the cuts in my knees, and I dropped them twice before shoving the right ones into the lock. When I yanked the door open, the interior reeked like it hadn't been cleaned in years, like wet leather and mold, and under it all that same rotten copper smell. And the seats weren't the same color they'd been before. The fabric was darker, like it had been soaked through with something that never dried. I almost gagged, but I shoved myself in, slammed the door, and jammed the key into the ignition, praying the engine would catch. And when it did, the sound was wrong, deeper than normal, like an animal growl vibrating under the mechanical churn, and the steering wheel felt hot under my palms, too hot to hold comfortably. But I held anyway because I wanted out more than I wanted to breathe. I backed out, fast gravel spraying under my tires, and the whole time I kept my eyes locked on the dirt road ahead, refusing to look in the rearview mirror, because I couldn't shake the certainty that if I did, I'd see someone or something sitting in the back seat, staring at me through the glass. The road out of the trailhead twisted along the rim, and I floored it as much as I dared. The canyon yawning open beside me on one side, the pine scrub blurring past on the other, and every now and then I'd catch motion in the periphery of my vision, tall shapes moving, just out of sight, keeping pace with my car, even though I was pushing 50, 60 miles an hour, and I knew if I looked directly at them, I'd lose control and go straight off the edge. At some point, the radio came on by itself. The dial twisting, though, I hadn't touched it, and the speakers poured out static thick and wet, sounding like something being chewed and swallowed, and through it, I could hear the chant again, low and bubbling, then sharper, faster, until it matched the rev of my engine, and once again, my name woven into it over and over, like they were calling me home. I slammed the button off, but the static kept bleeding through, faint like it was inside the wiring itself. The smell in the car so thick, I had tears running down my cheeks. From it, my stomach churning like I'd swallowed spoiled meat. When I finally reached the park exit station, I thought I'd cry with relief. But the booths were empty. No rangers, no cars lined up, just through the windows, smeared with something dark, like old handprints and the gate arm splintered hanging loose, as if something had torn it down. I didn't stop. I just barreled through and hit the main road, heading south toward Tusayan. That should have been the end of it. I should have made it into town in 20 minutes tops. But the miles stretched wrong, the road unspooling longer and longer beneath me. The same clusters of juniper and pinon pines repeating over and over, like I was circling without ever turning. And the sun, or what should have been the sun, still refused to show itself overhead. Just that endless blank white glow that cast no shadows at all. One point, I slowed almost to a crawl, because the asphalt ahead of me shimmered like heat mirage. But it wasn't heat. The shimmer was darker, like oil spreading over water, and as my tires rolled across it, the car jolted hard, like I'd hit a deep pothole. Except the road had been flat, the wheel jerking nearly out of my hands, and for a second, the engine roared louder than it should have, shaking the whole chassis. Before settling back into its growl, my phone had no signal of the screen. Blank, no matter how many times I reset it. The time frozen at 7:09 a.m., the exact minute I had seen that second signature in the trail register, and every attempt to change it failed. Like the clock was locked and wouldn't move forward. I don't know how long I drove, maybe minutes, maybe hours. The road unrolling endlessly under my wheels, until finally I saw buildings ahead. The edges of Tusayan. But when I pulled into town, it wasn't right. The gas stations, the gift shops, the hotels, they were there, but wrong. The signs, blank, no lettering, no logos, just faded boards. like the paint had been stripped, the windows of every building coated from inside with a film of grime too thick to see through, and the streets empty. No cars, no people, nothing. I stopped in the middle of the main drag, honking my horn like a maniac, hoping anyone would come out. But the sound felt muffled, like the air itself was swallowing it. And when the echo came back, it wasn't the same pitch. It was deeper, slower, like something repeating me, but dragging it through. Mud got out of the car finally because the smell inside was unbearable, thick enough to make me dry heave. But the second my boots hit the pavement, I realized the sound beneath my feet wasn't right. It wasn't the solid clack of asphalt. It was hollow, like stepping on a drum skin. And I backed up fast, scanning the street, the windows. And that was when I saw them, shapes moving behind the grime-coated glass. Tall and thin and bending wrong, like shadows stretched across walls. They didn't look human, though they tried. They moved with this jerky rhythm, like marionettes pulled by tangled strings. And though I couldn't see faces, I felt eyes, dozens of them, boring through the filth of the windows into me, my skin crawling like ants under it. The chanting came back louder than ever now, not from one direction, but from everywhere. The buildings, the ground, the sky, my chest. It rose in waves until I couldn't tell if I was hearing it or if I was making it, and I stumbled back toward my SUV, fumbling with the handle. The door stuck for a second, like something was holding it shut, then giving way all at once. I slammed inside, locked it, started the engine, which growled louder than before, and I drove blind out of town, ignoring the fact that the horizon never changed the road, never bent the clock on my phone, still frozen at 7:09 a.m., and the chant never stopping, only sinking deeper into my bones until it felt like it had always been there. So I kept driving south on Highway 64, or at least what should have been Highway 64, though it didn't feel right. The whole stretch of asphalt unrolled straight and flat, with no bends, no dips, no changes in scenery, just the same twisted juniper and pinyon pines repeating like I was circling a track in some endless loop, and every mile marker I passed was blank metal. The numbers sanded down, or maybe never painted at all, and the horizon never shifted closer, no matter how long I pressed my foot to the pedal. The chanting hadn't stopped. It was deeper now, not loud exactly, but woven into everything. The vibration of the tires on the road, the growl of the engine, even the wheeze of my own breath. And when I reached for the radio again, hoping for anything to break the monotony, the static came back wet and bubbling, like something submerged, and underneath it, I heard the same rhythm, like the words were pulling themselves through the wires inside the dashboard and dragging my name along with them. I kept telling myself I'd find something. Eventually, a turnoff, a ranger truck, a plane overhead, something. But nothing changed, and the smell inside the SUV was unbearable. A mixture of copper and meat rot that no open window could clear. It seeped from the seats, from the vents, from my own skin. Because when I glanced down at the bandages I'd tied around my knees, they were soaked through, not with blood, but with that clear metallic fluid hissing faintly when drops hit the floor mat. The road finally shifted, only it wasn't the way I hoped. It didn't bend or lead me anywhere new. It just dipped slightly into a hollow. And when I crested the rise again, I saw lights ahead, small points, like a cluster of houses maybe, a town, and my heart leapt, thinking I'd broken through somehow. But as I got closer, I realized the buildings weren't real. They were facades, flat wooden fronts with nothing behind them, like stage props set in the desert. The doors didn't open, the windows were painted black, and the lights were lanterns swinging on posts, but they had no flame, just glowing with that same flickering buzz I'd seen at the Trailhead kiosk. I slowed to a crawl, staring out the window at the fake town, and in one of the painted windows I swore I saw movement, a silhouette leaning forward to peer out at me, tall, thin neck bent too far, like a bird watching prey. And when I blinked, it was gone, leaving only the black paint staring back. The chanting surged, then louder and faster, and this time I could understand fragments. The words weren't English, but they made sense anyway, clawing meaning into my brain. Like hooks, I could feel them demanding something, demanding me, and for a split second, I wanted to answer. Not just wanted, I felt like I already was, my throat vibrating even though I kept my mouth shut, my tongue pressing syllables I couldn't pronounce. I floored it past the false down heart, slamming against my ribs, but the props just kept coming, row after row of fake buildings lining the road. Barns, schools, diners, all flat fronts painted in faded colors, some with words smeared across them, letters that shifted when I tried to read them. And I realized with a lurch that the facades were getting more detailed. The longer I drove, some of them smeared with handprints and stains, some with doors cracked open, revealing nothing but blackness inside, as if the world was building itself around me, piece by piece. The further I went, eventually I saw a gas station, or what should have been a gas station old style with a single pump and a flickering sign overhead, and I knew it wasn't real. But I stopped anyway because the needle on my gas gauge had been hovering below empty for what felt like hours, and I couldn't keep going on fumes forever. I pulled up beside the pump and cut the engine, and for the first time since Skeleton Point, the chanting stopped, dead silence pressing in, so heavy my ears rang from it. I stepped out of, the car legs trembling from more than exhaustion, and the pavement under my boots still sounded hollow like stretched skin. But I forced myself forward toward the pump. It was rusted, through eaten by something more than time. The nozzle cracked, the numbers on the meter spinning slowly, even though nothing was running, and the hose dripped that same clear fluid. I'd been bleeding from my knees, thick drops sizzling when they hit the ground. I stumbled back, gagging, and that was when I noticed the sign above the station shifting the letters, twisting themselves into shapes that spelled my name, long and jagged and wrong, like claws carving into the air. And beneath it, painted across the wall of the building, was the same circle I had seen at Skeleton Point, the same crooked sunburst burned into the surface, and at the center of it, the same deep footprint pressed into the wall, as if someone had stepped there before the concrete set. The silence broke then, but it wasn't the chant. Returning it was a voice clear and sharp and close to my ear. It said, "You signed," and I spun around so hard I nearly fell, expecting someone behind me. But there was nothing, just the hollow street, the false buildings, the desert stretching blank beyond them. I ran back to the SUV, threw myself inside, started it up, the growl of the engine louder than ever. And when I looked in the mirror without meaning to, I saw movement in the back seat, a shape hunched low, tall enough that its head brushed the ceiling, its body too long, knees bent at impossible angles. And though I didn't see a face, I knew it was grinning at me, because I felt the teeth in my mind sharp and endless. I swerved back onto the road, screaming at myself not to look again. But the weight of its stare pressed into me from behind, and the chanting returned full force so loud it shook the mirrors, the windows rattling with it, and though my lips were sealed tight, my own voice wove through the chant again, calling back in, rhythm answering as if I'd been part of it all along. The fake buildings fell away behind me, swallowed by distance, or maybe just ceasing to exist, and the road opened into desert again, flat and featureless, except for a single sign standing crooked on the shoulder, and as I passed, I saw the name carved into it, South Kaibab Trailhead, 0 miles. My stomach dropped and I slammed the brakes tires, skidding gravel spraying. And when the SUV stopped dead, I realized I was parked in the same gravel lot I'd left hours before, the same flickering light buzzing over the kiosk, the same empty cars rusted and decayed my own SUV, somehow both beneath me, and parked again in the exact same spot I had left it that morning. The thing in the back seat was gone, but the air was thick with its presence, and when I looked down at the register, still clutched in my trembling hand, I saw my name written 3 times now, once faint, once dark and carved, and once again beneath both of those in letters that hadn't dried yet, glistening wet, like they'd just been drawn, and the time at the top of the page was still 7:09 a.m. So there I was back in the gravel lot, staring at the same flickering light buzzing over the kiosk, the same row of cars rusted and wrong, the same canyon wind pressing up cold against my face, and my own SUV, sitting double one version idling beneath, me engine vibrating low like an animal, and the other version parked right where I had left it hours before, except hours hadn't passed. At least, not on the clock, because when I looked at my phone again, the frozen time still glowed back at me. 7:09 a.m. The register in my hand was heavier than paper should be, the pages damp with that same metallic smelling fluid, and the three versions of my name seemed to pulse faintly, like veins under skin, the freshest signature wet enough that a droplet ran down the page and fell onto my boot, where it sizzled and hissed before fading into smoke. I climbed out of the SUV, my legs shaking, my breath coming ragged, and the second my boots hit the gravel, I felt it, the sense that the canyon itself was breathing with me, every inhale expanding the walls, every exhale pressing them closer, and I realized with the sick certainty that I hadn't escaped. I hadn't even left. I had been swallowed whole and spit back at the entrance. Like a fly in a web, the lot was quieter than before. Not silent exactly, but layered with faint sounds. I couldn't quite place whispers, too many, to separate voices from wind dragging through brush footsteps maybe. Or the scrape of stone shifting, and every time I spun around, the sound stopped, leaving me dizzy and off balance, like the world was half a second behind me. I staggered to the kiosk, clutching the register tighter than I wanted to, and flipped back through the pages looking for anything that might explain what was happening, but most of the entries were ruined. The ink bled into the paper until the names became smears, but here and there I caught words, phrases, little fragments like "turned back at Cedar Ridge," or "shadows didn't move right," or "don't listen to it." And each time the writing broke off, mid-sentence slashed through as if the pen had been yanked out of the writer's hand. My heart was pounding so loud it hurt, and I dropped the register on the ground where it landed with a wet slap, like meat. And when I looked down, the pages weren't paper anymore. They were skin stretched taut over the binding pores, and hair standing out clear, and each of my names carved into it. Not written at all, but cut with something sharp. The edges still weeping. I screamed and kicked it away, but the book slid on the gravel like it weighed nothing, then flipped itself open again to a blank page, as if waiting. That was when the air shifted behind me, heavy and warm, and though I couldn't see it, I knew something was standing there, taller than me, broader than me, bending the light around it. And the chanting started again, low and guttural, close enough that I felt it vibrate in my ribs. It spoke not to me, but through me, my throat locking, up my tongue, moving on its own, my voice answering words I didn't know, words that hurt to shape. I bolted then, pure animal instinct, shoving myself into motion, sprinting across the lot, past the rusted cars toward the rim. thinking if I could just get into open space, I'd be safe, but the rim wasn't right. It didn't look like the canyon anymore. It looked like a mouth. The layers of red and gold and purple stone twisted into rings of muscle, pulsing faintly, as if the whole Grand Canyon was alive, and I was running straight toward its gullet. I skidded to a stop, gravel sliding under me, and for a second, I thought about throwing myself over anyway. Better to fall than to be caught. But before I could decide, the ground beneath me trembled. Not a quake exactly, but more like a heartbeat, strong and steady and wrong. I turned and ran back the other way, toward the line of trees near the lot, hoping the forest might give me cover. But when I reached them, they weren't trees anymore, at least not fully. The trunks split and knotted into shapes that looked almost like bodies, pressed together, faces stretched in bark mouths, open but silent, and as I pushed between them, the branches scraped against my back like fingers trying to hold me back. The air inside the grove was damp, heavier than the desert should allow, smelling of rot and copper. And underneath it, all something sweet, like fruit gone overripe. And I realized with a shudder that the sound was back, not chanting this time, but crying, dozens of voices, whimpering, overlapping, rising and falling. And every time I tried to pin one down, it slid into another. I stumbled deeper until I came across a clearing ringed with those twisted tree shapes. And in the center was a circle of stones stacked high, not cairns exactly, more like a well, though no water shimmered inside, just darkness deeper than shadow, and carved into the rim were the same crooked sunburst lines I had seen on the trail, and at the gas station, and at the register over and over again. I crept closer against every instinct, because something about the dark inside the stone circle pulled at me, not visually but inside my skull, a tug behind my eyes like pressure changes before a storm. And as I leaned over the rim, I saw it wasn't empty. The darkness rippled faintly, and in it floated shapes, pale faces half-formed, drifting like they were submerged, their mouths moving in silence until one pair of eyes rolled up and locked on me, wide and familiar and filled with panic. Staggered back because I knew that face, it was mine. The moment I pulled away, the crying stopped, replaced by laughter low and cruel, echoing through the trees and the branches around. The clearing began to twist tighter, knotting into shapes that leaned inward, closing me off, and I knew I had seconds before they sealed completely. So I turned and scrambled through the gap, scraping my arms raw against bark that cut deeper than wood, when I burst out into the lot again, gasping for air. The kiosk light had gone dark. The cars were gone, even my SUV, and the only thing left was the register sitting open on the ground, waiting, and on the blank page where words should have been was a sketch crude but clear of a figure walking down the South Kaibab Trail alone, head bowed, shoulders hunched back on its back. And when I touched my chest, I realized the sketch was me. I fell to my knees, shaking harder than I ever have in my life. Because in that moment, I understood I hadn't just walked into the canyon that morning. I had been written into it like a story or a prayer or a curse, and every step since had been following lines already carved, waiting for me to complete. And somewhere out there, deeper in the rock or under the trees or in the hollow road, I knew something was still chanting my name, waiting for me to stop fighting and start listening. So I knelt there in the gravel lot, the register open in front of me, the sketch of me etched across the blank page lines, jagged and dark like they had been carved, not drawn. And I felt my chest tighten, because it wasn't just a drawing, it was a mirror. Every detail right down to the frayed strap on my back, the smear of dust on my knee, the way I held myself, hunched forward, like the weight of the canyon was pressing on my back. The sketch figure had no face, though not yet, just a blank oval, and I couldn't stop staring at it, because even as I knelt there, watching the page shift, the lines started filling in faint scratches, layering into features. My features, the tilt of my nose, the cut of my mouth, the hollow circles under my eyes, until I was staring at myself in ink. I slammed the register shut, but the sound didn't echo like it should have. The lot swallowed it whole, and when I looked around, I realized the light was gone. Not just the buzzing bulb above the kiosk, but all light. The sky overhead, blank white just moments ago, was black now. No stars, no moon. Just this suffocating emptiness pressing down. And I felt my knees sink deeper into the gravel. Though it wasn't gravel anymore. It was softer, like flesh giving under my weight. And the thought shot through my head that I was kneeling on skin. I scrambled up fast, nearly tripping over my back. And when I looked back, the kiosk was gone too. Only the register left sitting on the ground, glowing faintly like it was lit from within the pages, fluttering though no wind touched them. And that voice returned, not the chant this time, but the clear, sharp one I had heard at the gas station. It said again, "You signed." I shouted back that I didn't, that it wasn't me, but the voice laughed long and ragged and answered, "You signed first, you signed last, you will sign again." The ground trembled, then slow and steady, like something vast shifting beneath me. And when I staggered toward the rim, hoping maybe the canyon would still be there, some fragment of the real world still standing, I saw only darkness stretching down and down, a throat lined with stone rings pulsing like muscle. Every beat deeper, louder, until my teeth rattled and my stomach lurched, like I was falling even though I was standing still. Backed away, gasping, and nearly tripped over the register again. the cover flopping open, and now the sketch had changed. The figure wasn't standing on the trail anymore. It was kneeling like I had been, and the background wasn't canyon walls, but that same circle of stones, with the dark pool at the center, the one I had seen in the grove. And when I reached for the page against my own will, my fingertips touched it and came away wet. I wiped my hand on my pants, but the moisture smeared instead of drying. And when I looked closer, it wasn't ink. It was that same clear metallic fluid leaking from me from my wounds, from somewhere deeper than skin. And I realized the book was feeding on me, or through me, each page drawing not just images but substance. The air grew hotter, then stifling like standing too close to a furnace. And out of the corner of my eye I saw movement by the row of cars, except there were no cars anymore, just hollow shells, twisted frames, slumped like carcasses, and between them shapes moved tall and thin shadows bent too far, their limbs jerking in wrong rhythms. And every time they stepped closer, I heard the gravel hiss under them, like acid chewing through stone. I grabbed my pack and bolted because instinct told me if they reached me it was over. And as I sprinted across the lot, the chanting came back so loud, my ears rang words vibrating through my ribs. And this time, I didn't just hear my name. I heard others, dozens, maybe hundreds. Each one called out, then swallowed by the rhythm, as if the canyon itself was a mouth chanting back all the names ever signed into that book. I tore down the dirt road leading away from the trailhead, my boots slipping on loose gravel, my lungs screaming. But the road wasn't the same anymore. It sloped down, not up, winding into the earth instead of out. And no matter how far I ran, the lot never got smaller behind me. I could feel it still there pressing against the back of my skull, the way a nightmare follows you, even after waking. At one point I stopped, bent, double gasping for air, and I realized the chanting had shifted. It wasn't outside anymore. It was inside my skull, my teeth vibrating with it. And when I opened my mouth without meaning to, the words spilled out thick and wet syllables. I didn't know, but couldn't stop speaking. And the second I tried to close my jaw, my lips cracked open, wider, splitting skin and leaking that clear fluid down my chin. I screamed through it, stumbled back into motion, and after what felt like hours, I saw light ahead, faint and flickering, and my heart leapt, thinking maybe the ranger station, maybe town, maybe anything real. But when I burst through the trees into the clearing, it wasn't Tusayan. It wasn't even the gas station. It was Skeleton Point. Again, the same stone ledge, the same impossible cairns, the same circle burned into the dirt. And this time, the footprint in the center was fresh, wet, steaming, and it was mine. I staggered back, shaking my head, whispering, No, no, no. Because I hadn't stepped there, I hadn't. But the print was exact down to the split sole of my boot, and the edges of the circle glowed faint red, like embers waiting for a breath of air to flare. And though I hadn't moved closer, I felt heat searing my skin. The cairns rattled, then stones clattering as if stirred by wind. But there was no wind. The air was heavy dead, and when I turned to run again, I slammed into something solid. The air itself folding into shape in front of me. Tall, broad, bending light into nothingness. And though I couldn't see its face, I felt the grin cut deep across it, endless teeth dragging over bone. It leaned closer without moving, its voice boring straight into my head. The same voice that had said you signed, and now it said, you walked, you wrote, you are written. And as it spoke, the register appeared again in my hands, heavier than before. The cover pulsing like a heart, and the pages opened to a new blank sheet, waiting. I dropped it screaming, but it clung to me, stuck against my palms, no matter how I shook them. And as the ink bled across the page, lines formed my hand moving, though I didn't move it, sketching a figure, stepping into the circle at skeleton point, the crooked sunburst burning around it, the footprint glowing brighter and brighter. And as the image finished, I realized with terror that the figure wasn't just me. It was me now in this moment, being drawn forward step by step into the center. I dug my heels into the dirt, fought to stop myself, but my legs buckled, my body shoving forward, pulled by strings. I couldn't cut, and the cairns leaned inward, rattling louder and louder until they collapsed all at once, stones tumbling down in a circle that sealed me in. The footprint ahead glowed white-hot, waiting for me, and the chanting reached a fever pitch so loud the world itself shook, and I understood then what had happened to the others. The names smeared in the register, the fragments of their warnings, they hadn't vanished. They had been walked into the page, into the circle, into the canyon itself. And now, it was my turn, so the ground shook beneath me. The cairns collapsed in that perfect circle, stones rolling to form a boundary I could not cross back over, and the footprint at the center glowed hotter and hotter, a beacon pulling at me like a magnet, dragging steel, and no matter how hard I fought, my legs dragged forward, knees scraping against the dirt, clear fluid dripping from the cuts and sizzling as it hit the ground. And all the while, the register clung to my palms, heavy and pulsing, like I was carrying someone's heart torn straight out of their chest. The chanting swelled until it was everything, until it was the wind and the earth and the blood moving in my veins, and I thought my skull would split open from the pressure. But just when I was certain I would step down into that burning footprint, a crack tore across the sky, sharp like thunder but dry as bone. And for the first time since this nightmare began, everything stopped. The chanting cut out mid-syllable silence, crashing down so heavy it made me stumble. The heat of the footprint dimming slightly like the canyon itself was holding its breath. And in that pause I heard something else, faint but clear. A voice, not the deep guttural chant, not the cruel laughter, but higher, softer, ragged with fear. And it said, "Don't step in." I froze every muscle, trembling, because the voice wasn't a stranger's. It was mine, and I swear on everything. It came from the register in my hands. I looked down, and the page was no longer blank, no longer sketching me. It was full of words, scrawled messy, uneven, as if written in panic, and every single one was mine. Sentences tumbling over each other, warnings, please, all written in my handwriting, and worse, in my voice. When I read them aloud, they came out, not as sound, but as breath scraping from my throat, even though I didn't want to speak. They said things like, "Don't sign, don't follow, don't look at it," and then others more broken, like it takes the ones who read it or it loops until it writes you hollow or only way out is through, and one sentence repeated over and over until it filled the margins. Burn the page, burn the page, burn the page. The register grew hotter in my hands, words searing into my palms until the skin smoked and split, and I screamed, hurling it down. But it didn't fall. It stuck to me, fused like a second layer of flesh, and the voice that had whispered, "Don't step in," shifted now, lower, harsher, until it sounded like two voices overlapping mine, and something else, and together they said, "You will write." The ground lurched, the footprint flaring bright again, and my body jerked forward, my boots inches from the glow. When I did the only thing I could, I bit down hard on my tongue until blood filled my mouth, real blood, hot and copper thick, and as it spilled down my chin, something shifted, the register hissed, as if the fluid burned it. The words on the page warping, twisting, smearing into black sludge, and for a breath the pull on my body loosened. I collapsed, backward, outside the circle, gasping, spitting blood into the dirt, and the cairns rattled violently, as if something inside was furious stones, bouncing and rolling toward me, but not crossing the invisible boundary. And for the first time, I felt like maybe I had broken something, not escaped, not safe, but cracked. The pattern. I crawled to my feet, wiped my mouth with a shaking hand, and bolted out of the clearing, crashing through brush, tearing skin against stone, not caring because every step away from that circle felt like a stolen second of life. And when I broke back onto the trail, it was daylight again. Pale early morning sun rising over the canyon walls, like nothing had happened at all. For a long moment I just stood there swaying dizzy, staring out at the vastness below the Colorado River. Glinting faintly far beneath me, mules, braying somewhere down trail, the sound, normal, human, comforting. And for the briefest moment I thought, maybe I was free. Maybe the nightmare had ended. Then I looked down and realized the register was still fused to my hand. I tried to pry it loose, fingers scrabbling nails tearing against the pulsing leather cover. But it was part of me now, veins spreading from it into my wrist, faint, glowing lines crawling beneath my skin. And as I watched, horrified, the book shuddered and flipped open on its own pages, fluttering faster than wind could move them until it settled on a new blank sheet. The air around me grew colder, shadows stretching wrong across the stone trail. When I looked at the page, words were already scrawling themselves across it, letters gouged like claw marks, and I recognized my own name, written over and over, until the page was filled edge to edge, and beneath all of them, a date, not October 17th, not today, but October 18th the next day, and the time 7:09. AMI staggered back, nearly tumbling over the edge, because it hit me hard and fast. The thing wasn't recording me. It was predicting me. It had already written the next day, the next loop, the next time I would stand in this exact place. And I realized with cold clarity that no matter what I did, I would be here again. Tomorrow, 7:09 a.m., bleeding, crawling, screaming, but always here. The canyon wind picked up hard, then knocking dust into my eyes, and I swear in the rush of it, I heard voices, hundreds of them layered, overlapping all the ones who had walked this trail, all the ones who had signed the register, crying, whispering, laughing, and beneath it all a deeper sound, slow, steady, the heartbeat of stone, and it spoke without words, pressing straight into the marrow of me. You are mine. I don't remember how I made it back up. Trail my legs moved, but the distance stretched and warped until each step felt like 10 miles, and every bend revealed another bend never ending. Until suddenly, without transition, I was standing at the trailhead again. Gravel under my boots, kiosk buzzing with that same sick light, and the clock on my phone still frozen at 7:09. AMI SUV sat, waiting, keys still in the ignition engine, idling low like I had never left. And when I yanked the door open, ready to drive, until the tank bled dry, the register shifted against my palm, and I glanced down at the page one last time. The sketch had returned darker than before, lines heavy and shaking. And this time, it wasn't me alone on the trail. It was me in the driver's seat, both hands on the wheel, eyes hollow, mouth open as if chanting. And behind me in the back seat, something vast hunched, low, its grin splitting the reflection in the glass. And when I looked up at the rearview mirror, I swear for half a second, I saw it grinning right there behind me, teeth too many for one mouth. So I stood there at my SUV, the rearview mirror, tilting down just enough to catch the pale outline of teeth. Too long, too sharp, splitting a grin that stretched wider than the glass could contain. And for a heartbeat, I froze, my own reflection gone, replaced by that smile alone, and the register pulsed against my palm. Veins glowing hotter and hotter until I thought my skin would peel away. I slammed the driver's side door shut, stumbling back, gravel crunching beneath my boots. My eyes locked on the dark interior of my vehicle, the faint shape in the back seat, not moving, not breathing, just waiting. And I swear I could hear it hum. Not a melody, not even a sound, really more like vibration, thrumming through the metal frame into my bones, like the canyon's heartbeat had followed me here and rooted itself inside my car. The sky overhead flickered, then a wash of pale morning replaced by the blank black I had seen before, as if the world itself couldn't decide what time it was. And when I checked my phone, the frozen numbers glared back at me, 7:09, glowing brighter than the screen should allow. And underneath, in faint, almost hidden letters, I saw it, a word scratched across the glass. Not part of the display at all. Drive. I shook my head, muttering, "No, no, no." But my hand moved on its own, the register dragging me forward, my fingers curling around the handle, pulling the door open again. And when I climbed into the seat, it wasn't relief that hit me. It was weight, the air inside, thicker, heavier, smelling of dust and copper, and something sweet, like spoiled fruit. And from the corner of my eye, the grin stretched wider. The engine idled steady, humming low, and I realized with horror, it wasn't the engine at all. It was chanting, faint under the hood, layered low enough that it disguised itself as mechanical vibration. And when I pressed my foot to the gas, the pitch shifted higher, faster, the voices rising in unison, as if urging me forward. I drove then, because I couldn't stop. My body wasn't mine anymore. The register burned into my palm, steering me just as much as my hands on the wheel. The headlights cutting through a fog that hadn't been there moments before, trees bent inward on either side of the road. Their branches arching into shapes that looked almost like arms, almost like ribs. And the deeper I drove, the less the asphalt looked like road, and all the lines warping into cracks, veins pulsing faint red. Every so often I glanced at the rear view, trying not to, but unable to resist. And each time the figure in the back seat grew clearer at first, just teeth, then a jaw stretching downward, then hollow sockets where eyes should be, and finally long fingers curling over the headrest. Right behind me, claws grazing the fabric so close I felt the fabric tear. The chanting swelled until I wanted to scream, and then over it faintly I heard my own voice again, only it wasn't coming from my throat. It was coming from the register pages flipping on their own scrawls, forming fast and jagged. And when I risked a glance, I saw words burning into the sheet in my handwriting, reading, "I am driving deeper. I am carrying it with me. I am bringing it home." I slammed the brakes, swerving hard, gravel spitting up around me. But the car didn't stop, the speedometer needle climbing higher than the road should allow the canyon whipping past. Though the road had vanished long ago, replaced by darkness stretching in every direction, the headlights catching nothing but endless black and still. The chanting urged me on faster, faster. At one point, I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, whispering, "Please stop. Please let me out." And for a moment everything did. The car halting mid-motion, the air silent and still. And when I lifted my head, I was no longer in the driver's seat at all. I was standing in another clearing, stone walls surrounding me twisted into shapes, like faces stretched in silent screams. And in the center again was the circle of stones, the same pool of black fluid rippling at its base, and hovering just above it was the register pages spread wide, like wings veins from its spine, burrowed deep into the rock around it, feeding and feeding. And inside the pool, floating just beneath the surface, I saw shapes, dozens, maybe hundreds, pale bodies with mouths open, eyes wide staring. And when they shifted closer, I saw myself again, not just once, but many versions, each one in different states of decay, each one mouthing the same thing: "Let me out, let me out, let me out." I dropped to my knees, clawing at my own palm, trying to tear the register free, screaming until my throat shredded, and finally, with a crack like splitting bone, the book ripped loose, tumbling into the dirt. And for a second, I thought it was over. But the ground shook, the pool roared, and the cairns reformed around me, higher, tighter, trapping me in. And the figure from the back seat stepped forward out of the dark teeth, grinning claws dripping black fluid, and its voice rolled through me, not sound, but pressure. "You carried me, you carry me." Still, it pointed one long finger at the register, and the book flipped open again, the blank page glowing faintly, and I realized it wasn't waiting for me to write. This time it was waiting for me to read. And when my eyes met the page, the words seared straight into me, letters gouging across my vision until I couldn't see anything else. And they said, "I bring it with me. I spread it where I go. I make more. I make more. I make more." The laughter came then, deep booming, shaking the stone walls, until dust poured down, and the pool bubbled higher, rising like it wanted to swallow me whole. And I staggered back against the cairns, whispering, "No, no, no," over and over. But the voice inside me answered, "Yes, yes, yes." The last thing I remember before everything went black was the page turning on its own, the sketch forming again, and this time it wasn't me on the trail, or in the circle, or even in the car. It was me sitting at a desk, head bowed, hands typing words, spilling across a glowing screen, and behind me in the reflection of the monitor, the grin wider than ever, watching, reading, waiting. So when I opened my eyes again, I wasn't on the trail, and I wasn't in the clearing, and I wasn't in the driver's seat of my SUV either. I was at my desk at home, or something that looked like home. My old lamp glowing weak on the corner, the cheap chair creaking under me, the faint smell of stale coffee and dust. But even as I looked around, I knew it wasn't right, because the window beside me showed not my yard, not the street, not the world I knew, but the Grand Canyon, yawning open, impossibly close walls twisting and pulsing like the throat of some living thing. The register lay across my keyboard, open to the newest page, words crawling across it in jagged letters before my eyes, and as they formed, I felt my own fingers moving across the keys in perfect rhythm, even though I wasn't trying to type. And when I glanced at the screen, I saw the same words appearing line for line, like the book was dictating me, like I was nothing more than its conduit. They said, I bring it with me. I bring it into the story. I carry it in every letter, every line, every word, and whoever reads will read it into themselves. I ripped my hands off the keys, shoving my chair back so hard it toppled, but the typing didn't stop the keys clacking on their own, fast, relentless letters streaming across the screen, and the book glowed hotter veins, spreading farther across the desk, crawling down the legs, into the carpet, weaving themselves into the floorboards. Like roots, I backed into the corner, whispering, stop, please, stop. But the air inside the room had thickened again, every breath heavy, every inhale tasting of dust and copper and rot, and behind it all that sweetness again, like fruit gone to mold. And from the shadowed corners I saw shapes stirring, the same two tall figures I had glimpsed in the canyon, their limbs jerking wrong, their teeth flashing pale in the lamp glow. And one by one they pressed closer, filling the room, though they never touched the register, as if afraid of it or reverent of it. The screen flickered, then lines of text blurring, until they showed not words but images, sketches forming as they always did, black lines gouged onto pale background. And what I saw made my stomach lurch, because it was me again, but this time I wasn't hiking or driving or kneeling. I was sitting right here typing, wide-eyed, hollow jaw slack, and behind me the sketches of those same figures, bending closer, closer, their teeth stretching into lines that cut across the page, and beneath it a single phrase repeated, "You are writing us, you are writing us, you are writing us." I screamed, slammed the laptop shut, but the clacking didn't stop. The screen still glowed faint under the lid, light leaking like blood through bandages, and the register pulsed harder, veins crawling up my arm again, reattaching themselves until I could feel the heartbeat pounding through my wrist. And with each throb I felt weaker, as if my blood was draining directly into its pages. I grabbed the lamp, yanked the cord free, and smashed it down on the register. Sparks flying, glass shattering. But the book didn't even dent the lamp itself. Split in my hand, metal bending wrong, as if the thing had fed on the strike and grown stronger. And when I staggered back, clutching the torn skin on my palm, the book turned another page on its own, and there I saw the next sketch. It wasn't me this time. Not directly, it was a faceless figure hunched over a phone or a screen. Something glowing in front of them, their head tilted forward, their eyes blank sockets, and around them the faint outlines of teeth grinning over their shoulders. And underneath, written in long dragging strokes, it said "The Reader." The air in the room dropped colder, then sharp like knives pressing into my skin. And all the figures in the corner jerked their heads toward me in unison, their jaws cracking wider, and the chanting came back not just through my ears, not just through my chest, but through the keys themselves, each stroke ringing like a voice. Dozens, maybe hundreds, layered together. And when I covered my ears, it didn't matter because it wasn't sound anymore. It was thought crawling through me, carving itself deeper. Lunged for the door, yanked it open. But on the other side, there was no hallway, no outside, no escape. Just the trailhead again. Gravel lot, empty kiosk, buzzing. That same faint light. The canyon yawning open beyond. And when I spun around to look back at my desk, my room, my house were gone, swallowed by shadow, leaving only me, the register, and the endless loop. I dropped to my knees, sobbing, shaking, because I understood then with a clarity that broke me. There was no leaving, no burning, no fighting this thing, because it wasn't just inside the canyon. It wasn't just tied to that trail or that circle. It was inside me, inside the words, inside every retelling. And as long as I kept breathing, as long as I kept remembering, I would keep writing. And as long as I kept writing, it would keep spreading. The register flipped one last page, open blank, waiting, glowing faint in the canyon, dark and in my own handwriting. Already forming at the top, I saw the next entry, not signed yet, but waiting for me to finish. South Kaibab Trailhead, Grand Canyon National Park, October 17th, 2022, 7:09 a.m. And I knew then, with a sickness deeper than fear, that no matter where I woke up, no matter what I tried, I would always return to this moment, this place, this beginning again and again, until I was hollow, until there was nothing left of me but the words on those pages and the grin watching from behind. So I am back again, standing in the gravel lot, knees weak, throat raw, the kiosk buzzing faint in the dark sky, my SUV idling exactly where it always is, the canyon yawning wide beyond me, and the register fused to my hand, heavy and alive each pulse, dragging deeper into my wrist. And no matter how many times this happens, no matter how many times I fight it, always brings me back here again and again. I stagger toward the rim, screaming into the emptiness, though the sound dies before it reaches the edge, as if the canyon itself swallows it whole. And the only thing that answers is the low chant, rumbling through the stone, through my chest, through the book. And when I open the cover, it is already written, the words etched across the page. In my own hand, though, I have not touched a pen. It says, I return, I return, I return. And beneath it the time, 7:09, glowing bright against the paper, like a wound that never closes. The cairns rise again, stones rattling, forming the circle at Skeleton Point, though I am not there. I am here yet. Somehow I am in both places at once. The trailhead and the clearing folding together, like pages pressed too tightly. And when I look down, my boots are already leaving prints glowing faint in the gravel, leading me forward step by step toward the burning circle. Though I have not moved, I claw at my arm at the veins, crawling out from the register, burrowed deep into me. But they are part of me now, pale lines glowing through my skin with each heartbeat, until I can feel the canyon pulsing in my blood. And when I stagger back, the world staggers with me, sky flickering black, then pale, then black again, like a strobe. And for a heartbeat, I see not the canyon, not the lot, but faces, hundreds pressed close, mouths open in silent screams, every one of them smeared and half-formed like names, bled out on the register pages. They press against me, then cold and damp, their mouths mouthing the same words over and over. Not let me out. Not help me just write, write, write. The register rips itself open again, pages flapping fast. And when it stops, the sketch is already finished, and this time I cannot look away. It is me kneeling here in the lot, but I am not alone. The figures from the canyon, the shadows from the car, the shapes from my room, all hunched close, grinning wide, and in the sketch, they are not behind me, they are inside me, teeth breaking through my ribs, claws hooking into my spine, mouths stretched from my shoulders, and it is not a picture of what will be. It is a picture of what is. I scream, but the sound is thin, weak. The canyon already drinking it in, and the air around me thickens until I am choking, gagging every inhale, dragging rot and copper into my lungs. And still, the chant grows, louder rising until it is all there is, until it is me. And then the voice returns, the one that spoke at the gas station, the one that has followed me through every loop, and it whispers Not outside, not around, but directly in my ear. Though there is no one behind me. You wrote first, you wrote last, you will write forever. My knees give out. I collapse onto the gravel, my hand fused to the register slamming against the ground. But it does not break it, only glows brighter, and the page turns one final. Time to the end blank, waiting open, and at the top, already, scrawled in jagged letters, is the start of the post itself. So this happened last fall when I drove up to South Kaibab Trailhead, Grand Canyon National Park, October 17th, 2022, 7:09 a.m. I am crying now, because I understand fully there is no end, no finish. The book is not recording me. It is me. It is all of us. Anyone who reads, anyone who speaks, anyone who carries these words forward becomes another page, another sketch, another voice in the chant. And the more it is told, the more it spreads. The gravel shifts beneath me, soft and warm and wrong. The canyon wind roars louder than it should. The grin flickers in the reflection of the kiosk glass, in the mirror of my SUV, in the black between each line of text and the register shudders veins, burrowing deeper, feeding hungrier, pulling more of me away with each beat. I don't want to keep writing, but my fingers move anyway. I don't want to keep speaking, but the words spill out anyway. And I know now, with perfect certainty, that this is what the others meant when they scratched their warnings. It does not stop. It does not let go. It does not die. It only writes and writes until there is nothing left but story. The page glows brighter. My eyes burn. My blood runs clear and thin. My voice is gone, but still. The chant builds until the canyon itself splits open, the rim collapsing downward, stone grinding like bone teeth closing, and I am swallowed whole again into the endless loop, into the register, into the mouth of something older and hungrier than anything we can name. And as I go under, I feel it grin wider than the sky, wider than the earth, wider than words. And its last whispers not a command, not a threat, but a promise you will read, you will carry, you will write, and then nothing but the page turning, waiting, waiting, waiting.